Good morning or afternoon, Scrappers! My name is Master Mimic, and welcome back to another episode of Roaring D20s, my little show where for once I will not be discussing all things D&D related. I know it's a little weird given the podcast title, but it's my show, and I want to do what I want with it. Anyways, quickly I just wanted to say I thought that today would be a very special occasion because I am recording this while sitting in my and Jackie's new apartment. Yes! Finally, we have our own space, and the journey from California all the way to North Carolina has finally come to an end. We're now going to plant our roots and just start living our lives. Yes! And if my voice sounds a little off, it's because I was just doing creature voices, or creature sounds, well, I guess both, for a project that I'm going to be discussing in this episode. So, as far back as I want to say, probably June of last year, maybe a little bit later, I announced that I was going to be working on a new show that would essentially be a little bit different compared to the usual stuff that we do here on Path of Dragons Radio. Uh, I guess, it goes without saying. It's Starship Phil. Starship Phil is a science fiction show, and a lot of people have been asking me about it, because not only did I get a huge casting call for the first episode, but I've also, have been kind of, slacking a little bit. But not for out of laziness. Like, literally, our situation was, not only was it the move from California to here just put a huge, damper on any sort of production I had for the show, but also, we ended up having to move in with some family with small children, and yeah, it's really hard to concentrate on an audio show where I need to have at least minimal sound so I can hear what's going on in my headphones in a house full of screaming young children. So but now that we have moved into our own space, I am currently working on it. And I know I already posted that episode of Ribeiro News Radio. That show is going to be essentially a companion piece to this, kind of like how Darklanders 101 is to Darklands of the World Before. Oh, excuse me. So, every other episode, or every couple of episodes, I'll release a new R&R episode to go alongside, kind of like stuff that's happening in the background of the main story. It's a good way for me to branch out the world or worlds of Starship Phil, without having to, cram it down your throats, basically. Anyways, but if anyone was really curious as to, what Starship Phil is actually about, I thought that this would be a good opportunity for me to really just delve in, not just into what the show's setting and characters and, what the general plot is going to be, but with no spoilers, of course, but also just kind of describe like my inspirations going into it, like what gave me the idea of like, darn it, that's it, I'm doing a science fiction show. um well, first, so Starship Phil takes place in the very distant future of the year 25,000 plus, where humanity has essentially completely left behind Earth. We then terraformed Mars, but then things on Mars didn't go very well, so we eventually migrated to this neighboring galaxy called the Ribeiro Galaxy. Here we ran afoul of these different alien races, as well as a very human looking race known as the Federated Federation of Federatia. So there was a time of wars, clash battles and all that, but then everyone just kind of finally realized, it's why don't we all just try, getting along for once. The Federation got everyone together in one room, and it brought about a time of, maybe not so everlasting peace. Because unfortunately, when you've been battling for hundreds of years, you're going to have some grievances that a little sit down at a table might not necessarily be able to clear up. So eventually, the different nations of this galaxy, such as the Great Red Empire, the Radic Republic, the Gashlu Gorefest, the Trinier Tribunal, and, well, the Federation is a neutral party, but you get what I mean. These nations essentially started hiring privateers, space pirates, to fight the battles that they were not allowed to do because of the treaty. Now, during this age, it was known as uh, the age of good vibes, because at this time everyone is fine. It's peace, tranquility, everyone's getting along. In the background they're hiring mercenaries and stuff to wreak havoc, but those are hired hands who can't be traced back to their employer, so it's fine. Until a space pirate captain came forward and basically blew the lid off the whole operation, explaining how all these different nations were essentially gathering together as like their own privateer armies to essentially fight the war that they're not allowed to do. And this was known as the Great Space Pirate Scandal, and it completely destroyed the Age of Good Vibes. But the problem was, not only did all four nations at the same time put in their votes to crumble the Galactic Republic that they had created, but they also submitted their declarations of war at the same time. So the Federation, being a neutral party and being this giant bureaucracy that basically all of them have a certain respect for, started processing a lot of paperwork very quickly. Not just the dissolving of this massive government body, but also everyone wanting to fight each other. So this has gone on for, I believe it was about 5,000 years. And this is known as the Age of Red Tape, and this is where the series actually begins. All these very powerful, very, competent, competent nations waiting patiently for the declarations of war to go through so that the Great Ribeiro War can begin. At this time, there's a lot of tension in the air. Each, although they can't officially go to war, send fleets into each other's space to, annihilate their sovereignty. These nations will take pot shots at each other every now and then. Like, if you guys listen to Ribeiro News Radio, the Trinier did something particularly mean to the Empire. I'm not going to spoil it because it's actually pretty funny. God, man, you wrote the thing, man. Stop, tooting your own horn. Whatever, I do what I want. Anyway, anyways, so that's essentially the whole concept of this, and the main characters. So Starship Phil is the name of the starship is Phil. Its captain is Trent Praxis, and he is a Ridikian, or a human, he's basically a mercenary for hire. He and his crew will just take odd jobs this way and that, if the pay is decent enough. But they're also not opposed to doing scrapping missions or things like that, retrieving salvage and whatnot. Oh, the AC just came on. I was like, oh, I feel cold. So the so you have Trent Praxis, and Trent is he's immature, but he isn't genuinely a good captain. Like, he's one of those people who seemed like he was born to be a spacer, and the hunk of junk Phil that he has, he basically constructed it, more or less on his own. And he has an AI on board whose name is simply Stan. Stan and him actually go back a decent ways. Not, just as I said, they basically have been together since he put the damn ship together. And Stan is very, he's a very dour artificial intelligence. He, the way that I would describe him is that he's very bored, and he's just, he doesn't have much patience for organics. If he was probably put into, the body of a combat bot, I don't know, he would probably do some decent damage, but because he's just a ship, he can only do so much. He might every now and then try to, do some fun things with the crew, but his humor is so dry, it usually falls apart, almost as quickly before, as he makes the joke. And as for, so you have the ship, you have the captain, but the thing about Trent though is that he was only born in the Republic, the Radic Republic, and he didn't necessarily know space all that well. He was essentially born in like the boonies, you know, scraping together all these parts to build this ship. And but then he ended up hiring a navigator as well as a medic. The navigator was Eliza of Sal, and the doctor was Big Sal. So Eliza of Sal is a Trinier they're essentially a race of these insectoid people who have, disturbingly human faces. And what the Trinier essentially are is they're just like this big hive. There are three queens that make up the tribunal of the Trinier tribunal. And whenever queens are born, like queen larvae, they're essentially ejected out into space. So where they die. So Eliza's very existence is mysterious as it is. Like how is she able to? Oh, sorry, I'm sitting up. How was she able to actually survive the odds essentially? And well, we'll figure that out in future episodes. But the thing with Trinier is the way I would describe them is very arrogant insectoid Vulcans. Like, they don't just look at logic, the way that the Vulcans do. They look at logic and they want to rub in the fact that we are more intelligent than anyone in the damn galaxy. We can do these incredible technological marvels at any point, and we choose not to do it because, it's not good enough for the hive. So the whole point with the Trinier is they're very stuck up. They will look down at the primitive, the primitive endoskeletons, and will scoff at them. So Eliza of Sal is different because she is a queen who has found some actual pretty decent living working on Starship Phil as its navigator. Her adopted father, Big Sal, is also an anomaly in the way that he is a Gashlug who adopted a queen larva. So, what's the deal with Big Sal? What the hell's a Gashlug? The Gashlug are the way you can imagine them is they're kind of like these gray, bulky, almost ogre-like humanoids that are often have a deep-seated rivalry with orcs. Yes, orcs are a thing. I will get into all that later. And the thing with Big Sal, though, is that he is such a great deliverer of death and destruction that after a while he began to wonder if there might be better uses of his talents. Like, he knows how to, he knows what to shoot in order to kill an enemy, but maybe if he found out how to, if someone who he knew, someone he liked, got shot in the same way, it'd be kind of nice to be able to, stop the bleeding. So he decided to essentially start his own clinic, and one way or another, he ended up on board Starship Phil. Now, he works both as its doctor and also as its main gunner, or I guess, it's cannoner? I don't know. So he's all about, jumping into the turrets and blowing away whatever threat is coming at them. And he has a long history of fighting in all kinds of wars, small stuff, not the big galactic one. And he's kind of listless. Like he's kind of just found himself at this weird point in his life where, among other Gashlug, he would kind of be looked down on. I mean, it's not that he's weak. He's definitely not. It's that he's prioritized things that normal Gashlug normally wouldn't. So, Gashlug are all about the fight. They all, they're the kind of people who have, like, weekly global brawls. Like, kind of like the Purge, but you can't murder, essentially. where these guys essentially just for a few hours every week beat the ever loving crap out of each other, black and blue, bloody teeth all over the floor, and then they stop. Let out all that aggression. You know, Now why exactly are they doing that? Because hopefully the big galactic war is going to start, and they want to be at their best. And so Big Sal, though, he wants to be a doctor, so that's strange. You're supposed to hurt people, you're not supposed to heal people. What's wrong with you? But not only that, but he's adopted a Trenier. And the Trenier and the Gashlug have never gotten along. They've always had, if the Gashlug and the Orcs have a rivalry, the Trenier and the Gashlug have this bitter hatred. You have the intellectuals versus the brutes. But the thing is that the Trenier, although they have numbers on their side, no pun intended, they're actually pretty squishy, pretty squishy bugs, and so they've been constantly not at a loss, but they've had their fair share of you know wounds at the hands of the Gashlug during the warring times, and so yeah, that's Big Sal. God, there's so much I want to talk about, but I gotta wait for the show. I gotta, I want to explain where Big Sal got his name, but I don't want to blow it because again, it's gonna be so cool when you actually It's gonna be cool and it's gonna be funny when you hear it in the show. I guarantee it. And so then you have the ship's engineer, who is a Zoenian blob by the name of Jarly. Zoenian blobs are essentially more or less inspired by the oozes or gelatinous cubes of Dungeons and Dragons fame. Jarly, for example, there's a line of dialogue in episode 1 where she's compared to, lime green jello, essentially. And she, the way that I would explain, the way she communicates is that she essentially sends up pockets of air, but she pops them at a certain frequency that make it sounds like just a normal woman talking. And yes, it is supposed to put a creepy image in your head, and that's exactly what I want. I want it to be like, you have this massless thing who sounds like just a totally normal woman, somebody who's, who's also head over heels deeply in love with Trent Praxis. And Trent, although he doesn't reciprocate her feelings, he does appreciate them, and I guess you could say that although Jarly is firmly in the friend zone, she's still in love with, Trent. She still respects him enough. She's not going to, shun him or anything like that. And so they have a very healthy relationship, like a very good friendship, even if there's a, unrequited love in there too. And let me see. I got Stan. Oh, yep. And you got the character that I personally voice. He is a bot named Eliphas. Eliphas is commonly referred to as a murder bot because, basically, long story short, bots are a relatively new species, race in the Ribeiro galaxy. And because of a rather sordid history of theirs, every bot had to have a certain chip planted in their processor that made it so that they cannot actively hurt organics unless their lives were indeed in danger. But there were very few who either rejected the chip outright or they had the chip removed. Yes, this is very reminiscent of Darklands. I know people are already thinking it because, bots are in Darklands and bots are in this. And Eliphas is one of the bots that had his chip removed, and he's referred to as a Malfa, which is a shortened word for malfunction. And Malfas are something that, bots with, I guess you could say chipped bots, have programming that detects Malfas if they're nearby. And they are tasked with not only broadcasting their location, but also trying to slow down and ultimately destroy them. And so, as a result, Eliphas, more often than not, is left alone on the ship because he can't often get off at certain colonies and settlements because if there are bots nearby, he can be detected, and that will just cause more problems for him and the crew. So he stays on board. Now, Eliphaz has a very what's the word? Not pessimistic. There's another, like, he's a very cynical person. I did model him a little bit off of like someone like Dr. House, where he doesn't necessarily want to be alone, but he doesn't want to be close to people, you know? And it's actually really cool. Like I'm like just kind of imagining the crew in my head, and obviously Trent Praxis has a little bit of that, like Han Solo meets Captain Mal from Firefly, and where he's this he's a real badass, but more often than not he's more interested in protecting his own skin. He's not willing to take too big of a risk. He's always tries to calculate things. And if a job sounds too bad, he will be willing to leave it, or try to find a way to get out of it. Because, what's the purpose of acquiring, hundreds of thousands or even millions of credits if you're not alive to, enjoy them? And so with Trent, being a very, he's a realist, but he likes to be optimistic. He can be a positive thinker. That's why I wanted Stan to be, the kind of dour AI that he is, because you have Trent, who's essentially it's the difference between someone who's a morning person and someone who is just not. And that's why I think it's really funny that these two have that kind of relationship. Even though he's the captain and Stan is the, it's the thing that's keeping the ship running essentially. Not lowering Jarlee's position at all. And for Jarlee, I did love the idea of this, like an alien that has no, like, the way that I would describe it is an alien that has no real reproductive capabilities, in love with a human. Now I know that sounds like some freaking fetish shit, but it's not. What I liked about it is that it feels wholesome. It feels pure. There's not really a physical attraction on that level. I mean, she does find him handsome, but what Jarlee feels is very, like I said, very pure. Like she understands. There's no way that a human and a Zoinian would be able to have an actual, a warm relationship, something that could last. Not only because, he's an organic, but Zoinian blobs can turn their insides into, acid to dissolve organics. So it'd be a literal toxic relationship. And then I love the idea of Big Sal and Eliza of Sal. As you guys can guess, Eliza does take her name out of, from Sal. And even Eliza's name is shortened. Her real name is Ordelize Mundral. And it was really fun hearing Juan trying to pronounce that name over and over and over again in his recordings. I going forward, I'm pretty sure I'm just gonna start sending all my actors like the proper pronunciations to things, because kind of ran into some issues like that. Anyways, so what I really like about Big Sal and Eliza of Sal is that they are essentially, like, it's kind of a play. Like, the whole idea of the odd couple is nothing new in media. I get that, but it's always, it's usually the friendship that normally ever was, or the love that never really was. But this is, for once, it's a different take. It's this idea of, it is, a parent and adopted child. This Gashlug warrior, this warlord who's painted the battlefields of countless worlds red with the blood of his foes, adopted the child of his species' ancestral enemy. Like, probably from the moment Big Sal was was born, essentially, he was probably told about how horrible the Trenier were, and how they should not be trusted. The only good bug is a dead bug, essentially. And yet he for some reason, looked at this larva and decided to adopt her, take her as his own. And there's definitely a strong, fatherly love there. Like, you guys will see in episode 1, that Big Sal he is Eliza's father in every way, and it's something that it's a God, here I am stuttering. But I've always loved the concept of that because, sometimes a parent and a child don't always necessarily need to be of blood, I I mean, I've obviously I've always my parents aren't in that. I'm not in that situation with my parents, but I have seen many times the affection and the love that parents have for their children, even if they know that child is not, biologically theirs. But it's I've always found it so beautiful. Like I'll always say to the day I die that there is no there is few greater loves in this world. Not even greater. That's a bad way to word it, but there are few loves as powerful as that of a parent and a child. There might not even be one, because looking back at just the way that my dad brought me up, the sacrifices he made to make sure that not only did I find my way in the world, but I had the the mindset to chase my dreams, even faced with people who tell me no, people who tell me don't do that, that's wrong. you know like I wouldn't be here voice acting if it wasn't for my dad. I wouldn't be writing if it wasn't for my dad. And so it just felt so, you know it felt close. It felt close. Like, obviously I am related to my dad, but it's like I see the affection that these non-blood related families have, and yet they love each other nonetheless. So from what people will see, I did channel a lot of my own dad's fatherly affection into Big Sal. Like, he's not only really protective of Eliza, but he's willing to crack some freaking necks if he needs to. And that's just always been like something I've loved to explore with my characters. I mean, obviously, the closest alternative was Darklands with Jules's relationship with his father Sawyer, where they were very hateful towards each other. They didn't love each other at all. There was no affection. There was no tenderness. It was just toxic. It was just hostile. I wanted to do something different with Big Sal, and I mean, how non-blood related can it be when you're literally different species? It's the warm-blooded Gashlu taking in the insect Trenier, looking at this child and so saying, "This is going to be my daughter. This is mine. She is my daughter." Anyways, I went on a little tangent there, but that's the thing though about this show. Darklands, I love doing Darklands. Don't get me wrong. God, it sounds like I'm going to say, "Oh, but Darklands." No. I feel like Starship Phil, in a lot of ways, kind of hits a little bit more close to home for me. The places in Darklands are actually based off places I personally have been to, so it's close to home in that way. But obviously, the whole idea of a scrapper with a talking rabbit, that's not really an experience I personally had. But with Starship Phil, it's allowed me to be a little bit more, personal with it. The way that I can write this show, the way that I can explore different themes and, ideas and aspects. It's really cool. Like, I literally have an entire galaxy to just have fun in. And that's, as a writer, that just makes me so freaking excited. Like, if like anyone who genuinely enjoys writing, they know exactly the feeling that I am having. because it's a different beast, creating the world of Starship Phil, because it's literally not a world, it's worlds. I'm creating an entire universe, a galaxy, and I have to put people in it. I have to put circumstances in. I have to put lore into it. I mean, with Darklands, sure, I have, this huge, page of just backstory, history, events of that, basically the entire history of the Darklands universe going as far back as like the 1920s all the way up until the apocalypse. Yes, I have that timeline. I do have that. And did I just sit down to it in one day? Of course not. But that's essentially the kind of feeling I have with Starship Phil, though, is that because this is literally thousands of years in the future, anything could really happen at this point. Earth is a distant memory, if that. Most people in this universe, most humans in this universe see themselves as descendant of the Martians, the original humans who settled on Mars. They have little, if no recollection or whatever of Earth. And so it's kind of like it feels like a completely new circumstance, it's literally completely separated from anything else I've ever done. And you guys would know that I am a huge science fiction nerd. Like, I love sci-fi. I mean, you can just ask Batty. She knows. Obviously, I am in love with Star Wars. I respect Star Trek. I haven't actually put much time into Star Trek, but I respect it as a franchise. Not like I can't really give much of an opinion on the more recent stuff because I'm not really interested in the more recent stuff. But the original series, Deep Space Nine, Next Generation, those are the kind of things that I think about when I think about Star Trek. But so like with Starship Phil, God. Neighbors up there. They have like a stampede of rhinos up there or something. I don't know. But with Starship Phil, it's essentially the way that I described it a lot to people is it's essentially take Firefly and then sprinkle in, the kind of the kookiness of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and take a big old syringe and just plunge in the scope and vastness of Warhammer 40,000. Like the ridiculous planet-sized ships. These, wars have gone on for thousands and thousands of years. Oversized weaponry, oversized armor. The whole, giant, massive wars. That span the stars. That's kind of the thing I'm going for with this, because I like for Warhammer 40K. Is so it's so vast. This is the best way I could describe it. Like, there's just so much lore put into that series, and I love the universe. Granted, there's some things about it that I kind of roll my eyes at, but it's this idea of like for example, the Great Red Empire is probably the closest thing to the Imperium of Man, but while the Imperium literally worships, what may or may not be a corpse sitting on a throne and calling him the Emperor of Man, but the God Emperor of Man. But then you have the Great Red Empire, who has the Red Mistress, the Red Empress. And the Empress is very much alive, and she actually has a harem with hundreds of male concubines. And she has not taken a single consort. So it's very different. You have the Imperium, who's, that's heresy, purge the heretic, crush the Xeno. And then you have the Great Red Empire that's like, their very ruler is just having a ton of fun in the position, basically. And it's like, I want to expand on that. The Schlug are clearly kind of derivative of the orcs from Warhammer 40K, except they're a bit more intelligent than the orcs, and not in the way of like, oh, they throw a bunch of stuff together and magically it's a rocket ship or it's a tank. Like the Gashluk actually do have a war machine that they can, they have capable engineers. It's just they love fighting. The Trenier could be seen as kind of like a derivative of the Eldar in a way. Um, and I do introduce a kind of like a universal threat to the galaxy, like not necessarily like a major faction, but just kind of like a pest, a menace that is called the Swarm. And the Swarm is clearly, like I wear my influences on my shoulder, my inspirations on my sleeve here, where they're clearly derivative of Tyranids or the Zerg from StarCraft. But because I've always loved that kind of concept of these creatures, and I think it's even funnier that you have these monstrous insect aliens sharing the same space as these intelligent Trenier. So maybe there's some plot elements in there. Maybe there's some story there. Who knows? We'll see. But it's really fun because, like I said, there's just a lot of kookiness to it. There's people people talk about, like I just mentioned, the giant planet-sized ships. These big old galleons, or is that what they're called? The ships, whatever. These big old dreadnought warships that can have their own gravitational pull. They're just so huge. Except I look at that and I say, but what if it was a giant mobile superstore, and just the stuff comes from there? It's just like, holy shit. I'm having just so much fun with Starship Phil, people. Like, oh my god. Like, I am working so diligently to get this damn episode out because I want you people to listen to it. I want you to experience it because, holy crap, I haven't been this excited for a project since Misfits of Dawnwood. Ever since Batty gave me the okay to adapt that series into an audio drama, that's how I'm feeling with Starship Phil. And the best thing about Starship Phil, too, is that it's everything I've always wanted to do with a science fiction show. It has my kind of personality in it. It has my influences. It has everything that I absolutely love with the genre just thrown in there, and I have this beautiful kooky cast of characters to play around with, and some fantastic voice actors who are willing to help me. Like, holy crap! I mean, I got Marcus Rothenberg, who's helping me as Trent Praxis. Araya Mackay is playing Jarlee, my beloved baddie. She plays Eliza of Sal. Juan Balcazar plays Big Sal. And then you have Jalen, who is stepping in as Stan. And that's just the beginning. I mean, then there's the orcs. Oh my god, wait till you guys see the freaking orcs. You have Korthog, voice to perfection. It's, oh my god, you guys got to see it. I don't want to go any more with this. I want to go on the spiel here, but I gotta hold back. I want you guys to experience this, and I know it's taken me so long, but the thing is, I have the time, I have the attention, and I have all the resources I need to make this show a possibility. And I do apologize for the long wait, but I guarantee that it's not going to be much further. My God. Sorry. It's just, whew, that was a lot of energy. I'm just so excited for this, people. Like, every time I look at the little splash screen that Araya Mackay made me for Starship Phil, I just get so excited all over again. Like, I can't wait for all of you to see this universe. I can't wait for you guys all to experience it, Is it going to become huge? I don't know. I hope it does. I hope this becomes I hope this really climbs up there, I hope this series gets really big, but you never know. Neighbors. But I'm a freaking record right now. I'm just so pumped for this, And in case you're wondering, well, why aren't you working on it right now? Well, because I wanted to make this episode. I wanted to talk about it to you people, you know? The people who I hope will grow to love this series as much as you love Starship, or as much as you love Darklands. Like, no pun intended, but I really hope that Starship Phil opens up new frontiers for Path of Dragons radio. And if it does, I hope you're all there to witness it, or you're all there for the ride. You know, like Path of Dragons radio has become so much more than I really expected of it. I mean, people might look at my subscriber count and just kind of like shrug, but I mean, that's over 100 people. That 100 over 100 of you folks listened to my shows and said, yes, yes, this channel is worth my time. This channel is worth investing my time into. And that's like every single one of you I am so thankful for. Like I'm thinking about it now. I hope that next year this section of this show is very outdated. You know, like I hope that Path of Dragons continues to grow, and I hope you're all going to be there with us, because you people make this whole thing possible. I mean, I wouldn't be this excited for Starship Phil if I didn't have such an amazing audience waiting to listen to it. And that's why I feel so much like, it's not even pressure, but it's like why I feel so annoyed when, you know, all this time is going by and I just can't find the, you know, that the opportunity to sit down and work on this, because you people deserve all the greatest things. You know, you guys deserve to have, you know, entertainment, and I hope that I can give it to you. I hope that you guys will continue to, you know, invest time into Path of Dragons radio, and I hope that you guys absolutely love Starship Phil. Well, I guess from there, I don't really have much else to talk about. For those who haven't, I would again recommend checking out Ribeiro News Radio. It is kind of like a prologue to Starship Phil, in that it kind of gives you a nice little peek into the world of, you know, the universe. The world of the universe. Jeez, listen to that. But you know what I mean. So it's, you know, it's not necessarily like a look at the actual show itself, but you get a good idea as to not only the, you know, the general setting, but also the tone that I'm going for. And when this show comes out, I really hope I'll see each and every one of you there. Anyways, I'm a Master Mimic, and I hope you all have an amazing day. Thank you all so much. Have a great one, everybody.